Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to a slightly delayed version of Talking TSR. Welcome, everybody. It's officially pumpkin season here in the Northeast. Well, I guess technically it's pumpkin season everywhere, but it's definitely pumpkin season in the Northeast. Good evening, Rick, my co-worker to my virtual whatever. How's it going, man?
It's going well. I'm enjoying the weather now that things are cooling off a little bit here in beautiful northern New Jersey, right? It's gone from hot to good, I think. So
Yes. So still humid a little bit. Still could use more rain, but we're getting rain right now, so that's a good thing.
yeah.
So
And
cool.
and rounding on October, which I still can't get my head around. I feel like I
Yeah.
just went to the beach and now it's and this is the time. I was telling some friends last night, for me, once we hit Halloween, from Halloween to New Year's, really, it's just a blur of holidays. So
Yep. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
that fast time of year.
It really is. It really is. Yeah. It's all back to school time and everything. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yes.
Just things keep plodding right along. So we've got another excellent show for you guys tonight. We are going to be talking about the classic adventure N4 Treasure Hunt. Which is interesting because there's really not much of a treasure hunt, and I guess there is sort of a treasury hunt part. But anyway, it's not really like a treasure hunt. But this is a little bit of an interesting one for us. This is probably an
Mhm.
off the grid adventure for a lot of people. 1986, I think it's the latest one that we've ever done. You can see that it's in that newer format that the adventures were later on. Certainly a classic in my opinion. If we have, hopefully we have, and let us know if we do have any of folks out there in the chat. But if you're a DCC RPG fan, this is the
Mhm.
module that really kind of started it all as far as the zero level concept. This is the infamous
Yeah.
zero level adventure that kind of led to the foundation of some of the earlier DCCs before the DCC RPG. DCC Zero, Legends Are Made. Legends Are Made, not. Oh my God, I am totally blanking on the title. Legends Are Born, not Made. That's what. No, Legends Are Made,
Yes.
not Born. Oh my gosh, it's been too many years. And also Halls of the Minotaur. So
Mhm.
if you guys are familiar with those adventures, this is the one that really kind of started all. This is the one that kind of I would say probably put the seed in the Dark Master's head
Mhm.
to kind of start off the DCC RPG with kind of zero level adventures. Not necessarily a funnel, but the fact that you were not an adventurer when you started. So Rick, give me that high level view of what you think of this adventure and
Sure.
some of your memories of this adventure.
Yeah, well, start just to echo your lead in. Obviously, in DCC RPG terms, very much a character funnel, and surprisingly deadly. You have a situation where even rolling with the characters, I think the ones provided are all given 6 hit points, but even with that six hit point basis, this could be a dangerous adventure. You could, not finish with as many characters as you started off with. But yeah, just for the overall concept of no class, no alignment, uh, just the characters literally starting from beyond ground zero and building their way up and uh, you know, kind of finding their class through what they do, I think is just such a fabulous concept that, this certainly one of the earliest implementations of that. So, to me, that's the standout. That's the elephant in the room, is that whatever other little flaws there are with this module, I think just for that concept is so, earth-breaking and inspiring for so many RPGs now, and certainly for the DCC RPG, major inspirations. So yeah, groundbreaking in that sense, I think.
Yeah. So for folks who don't know, so in this adventure, you started out uh, zero level.
Mhm.
You had minus 500 experience points. So you actually had to gain 500 experience points before you would get your first level. Like Rick said, you started with 6 hit points. You were given a secondary class, which kind of, was kind of it could be farmer, it could be sailor. The
Mhm.
setting was kind of a nautical setting, so it was kind of pushing you a little bit in that direction, that you would probably have a sailor in your midst that would probably be helpful. So and it was definitely geared toward a novice game master too, which was
Yeah.
interesting that
Yeah.
it was that I kind of feel that they were kind of trying to do a little too much here, maybe, because I'm
Hmm.
not so sure this was a great adventure for a novice game master, because you were
Hmm.
kind of not using the rules as intended. It might have been
Yeah.
better to maybe do a first level adventure and kind of do all the little things. I think it helped what they were going with some of the extensive background material and everything. But I guess I saw U1 and U2 a little bit better as adventures
Hmm.
kind of set up for the novice game master. But
Yeah.
they certainly did take their time on this one and kind of present a lot of additional supporting material, I guess I would say, to help
Hmm.
out a game master if you kind of worked your way into a corner and you kind of didn't know how to get out. What were your what were your A, did you play this one? And B, what
Hmm.
was your overall thoughts back in the day of this adventure?
Hmm. I did not play this one. Back in the day, I remember finding it interesting. I wanted to play it, but for whatever reason, I never found a group of players that were willing to start at that sort of negative level and go through it. Um, and I think at the time, the overall adventure struck me a little flat in some areas, which it still does now. In truth in advertising. There's parts of it I like. There's parts of it that we'll get into that. I'm sure that I didn't find as inspiring for whatever reason. I wish now I had done it at least once, just again for that kind of concept of coming up. And like you said, it really isn't the greatest option for a new GM. Um,
No.
Something like, as we discussed in our show when we discussed U1, that's a good example to me for a new game master. This one, there's just too many little areas where things can go off the rails in a big way.
Yeah.
You have a major time crunch. You have, again, a definite uh, chance of party death, or TPK for that matter. There's a lot of factors here for the DM to juggle, keeping the characters on the schedule and just keeping track of that whole system of the characters' alignment and the characters' classes and what they're doing, in addition to all the normal mechanics that a new DM would have to learn. It's too much, I think, in my opinion, for
Yeah.
a new DM to swing. So like you said, I laud them for trying to go there, but it's like a bridge too far. I think they should have just ejected the new DM concept and just gone with their new,
Yeah.
they're gone with the zero level concept and left it at that, and not tried to make it a beginner module to boot.
Yeah,
You
I would agree. I think we got a little confused, where I think it was pretty good for novice players who possibly didn't know
know.
some of the
Hmm.
nuances of D&D and role-playing games, because they could literally just start playing right out of the gate and jump right into the
Yeah.
action. But I really think it was more for experienced game masters, because like you said, with the juggling,
Yeah.
I would have probably put some of the onus more on the players as far as the tracking. I have to admit, one of the things I remember, again, we always talk about this when we first talk about what module we're going to talk about.
Hmm.
There's always those couple of first things that come to mind,
Hmm.
on it. And one of the things that came to mind was the tracking forms on how to track
Hmm.
the quote unquote class tendencies of the characters. And I remember those, and in doing my review for this show, I was like, wow, those are terribly designed. They took up too many pages. They could have done it like in a chart, a one page chart, like, which would have been a lot easier, I think.
Yeah.
And again, I think it would have even been easier if maybe that was incorporated into the character sheet, and the characters as they were playing would just knock off little check boxes whenever they did something thiefy like or fighter like.
Yeah.
Would be my thought. I also didn't like some of their choices. The minus 500 experience points was odd.
Hmm.
Again, a lot of times when you go with negative numbers, you can put people off kind of pretty quickly. I maybe would have done something
Yeah.
like, yeah, the problem is, back in first edition, every class had a different amount of XP points, before they got the first level, before they got the second level. So it's like, so you kind of couldn't do that. I would have done like half of your XP points to your level would have,
Yeah.
you're something like that. But again, that probably, they probably thought about that, but it didn't work. So yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
love that part. And I also didn't like some of the things where, well, they said you got to pick one weapon proficiency. This is back in the days when you had weapon proficiencies, you had to pick them individually. But like if you picked up a sword and then wielded a sword a little bit, you know, you could get good, not good at it, but you could get not awful at it. But then like
Yeah.
if you did that, all right, and again, it's like 3 combats, I think, or 2 combats or whatever. But then you couldn't pick a character class that was forbidden to use swords. Like, so if you spent that time to use
You're
the
locked
sword,
in.
you were kind of locked in. Like, you
Yeah.
couldn't be a druid, you couldn't be a cleric, you couldn't be
Yeah.
a wizard. And I kind of don't like when you're taking things away from players, taking choices away from players. So, but you know, again, the way the rules are written back in the day, you know, a wizard couldn't use a sword. So, you know,
Yeah.
it got into some a little bit dicey things, I think, when they tried to pull it off. So my opinion on this, I used to love this adventure, love it.
Okay.
And I thought it was actually, like I said, I thought it was one of my favorites. But again, upon further review, now looking at it with my eye now 40 years later, I can see all the shortcomings on it, and I can see, you know, I think maybe I like the concept and I like some of the setup, but then some of the execution I didn't particularly care for.
And that's exactly it, Chris. You used the perfect words to describe it. It's more execution, I think, because all the elements are there. I love the overall concept. I love things like island type situations like this, even if they can be a little railroady. I like the idea of the sort of dueling humanoids, you know. I definitely like the idea, and I'll get into that later about the whole goddess thing. I think there's a lot of interesting elements there. It's just in execution. I even found now reviewing it for this show, trying to come up with, you know, my favorite facets and elements of the adventure. It was one of those adventures where it's more a sum of the parts thing. I really struggled finding too many individual areas that I liked, as opposed to more me just liking the concept of the whole thing, if that makes sense. And I agree with what you said earlier. It's definitely comes off as more a module for beginning players, absolutely, but not for beginning DMs. You know, for the reasons we discussed. I think for players who have no idea of a character class, maybe even younger players, to just take them and give them a character and let them kind of do their thing and find class. I think that's a really cool concept. You know, on some level, I'm a little torn on that, even though too, because like you said, at the end of the day, players are happy when players have choice, or the illusion of choice at the very least. And, you know, and as we as DMs know that sometimes, you know, you have to use the illusion of choice instead of choice. But the idea of kind of locking them into a character class as opposed to letting them pick a character class that they really want to play, I don't know, maybe for certain players, this wouldn't even work. You know, with the right group, though, I think, or a group of beginning players, you know, that really are very new to D&D and just trying to get their heads around the whole concept of classes, it could be a very unique way to introduce them to that. So
there's even a part in there where they talk about how when you sit down with the player and actually get to that point where you're going to pick your character out, you know, you first let them tell you what they want to do, and they're like, hey, I want to do a thief, and then you look at their little record and thing, and you see, wow, they tried to swing at every orc that they ran into. So it's like, you should really be a fighter. And they even say, if the player doesn't agree with you, well, it's the game master's decision at the end of the day. So like, I mean, I could definitely see some hard feelings there. You know, if you're sitting there thinking, well, I want to do this kind of concept, but then the game master's telling me I can't do it now, or again, I didn't know. It's like, we really needed to have somebody to wield a sword. Now that I wield a sword, I don't want to wield a sword, and it's kind of like, well, you're kind of stuck. You're wielding the sword now, so you're the sword wielder.
Because, you know, it is a survival adventure at the end of the day. And so, you know, pragmatically, players might just have their characters do what they need to do in various situations to survive. And that might include swinging that sword, because it's life or death. But then, yeah, on the flip side, like you said, that can then maybe railroad that character that had their head set on a wizard. Now they're stuck playing a fighter because they swung a sword a few times.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely it's a kind of controversial path. I think it's definitely one of these modules that falls into the box of with the right group, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So for folks who are not familiar with this, and I see a couple people in the chat, it sounds like they're not. So you start out, you're captured by slavers, and you're in the hull of a ship, you know, in the hold of a ship, and a storm hits, and the ship runs aground, and you have an opportunity to escape. And again, you don't even have boots. You basically have some tattered clothes that you're wearing. It's cold, it's
Yeah,
stormy. You have basically nothing. So
yeah.
you know, and they give you some hints on some things, like you could use the chains that you're bound with
Mhm.
to use them as weapons. I wish there was a little bit more on, you know, utilizing weapons and you know, improvised weapons, I guess I would say. You know, picking up, you know, maybe like a little some information on, hey, here's what a rock does, here's what, you
Mhm.
know, a broken piece of ship would do if it was wielded as a club or something like that. I think they kind of left a lot of that up to the game master. And again, but they also were like, well, this is for beginning game masters, so kind of
Yeah.
figure it out. I mean, they did give plenty of opportunities for equipment, you know, but those first couple of scrapes you get in, you probably don't have any. So
Yeah.
so yeah, it was like I said, it was a little bit interesting in that regard. I do love the concept of starting with no equipment and starting captured and figuring it out. I really thought that was kind of spot on.
Mhm.
And I've never run this adventure. I've played a version of this adventure that I didn't realize I had owned this module, and a couple years later I joined a campaign. And boy, this is a classic case. I might have even told this story of, you know, we didn't do session zeros back then. So, you know, we were told create a first level character and show up at, you know, 8 p.m. on Wednesday night and we're gonna play. And I remember this was back in the day with all of the optional rule books, the fighter's handbook and the
Mhm.
thieves handbook. So I created a dwarven urban ranger, basically. I mean, he was all about
Huh.
urban. He was all about, you know, sewers and streets
Mhm.
and interaction. He had all kinds of secondary skills and stuff like that, right? It was set up perfectly, all that. And then, you
Mhm.
know, we're stranded in the wilderness. Actually, was he a ranger? Yeah, no, he was not a ranger. Actually, he was a thief, I think. I forget exactly what it was, but he was a dwarf. It was a caver. That's right. He was a dwarven caver,
Oh man.
but like an urban, like an underdark urban one. And then we were stranded on an island, and he was useless. He was absolutely
Yeah.
useless, and I felt trapped. I felt trapped in the fact
Mhm.
that I didn't know this is what we were gonna do. I'd set up my character as like all reliant on crazy exotic weapons and stuff like that, and I had access to none of that. Couldn't do anything. It was a terrible experience. And you know, but it was sort of fun, but it was frustrating, and nobody
Mhm.
wants to be frustrated at the table. And eventually we stopped playing because I wasn't the only one frustrated, but there was a lot of people at the table actually frustrated. But yeah, so it's like, so I really haven't even, you know, you know, played this one that much, just that one
Mhm.
time, and I didn't even play it all through. And again, it was also wasn't exactly this module. It was like just based off
Yeah.
of the module.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know though. We never got to the end of it, so maybe it really was. So, um, so yeah. So, and I guess a couple of other things just to talk about this adventure. So this adventure is presented in episodes, which
Mhm.
is kind of interesting. That hasn't been done a lot lately. There's definitely some sites that you want to explore,
Mhm.
but I found the episodes to be very railroady. And again, maybe
Mm.
this is why they tagged it for the novice game master, because obviously for a novice game master, railroad is easier. But the episodes
Mhm.
themselves were, in my opinion, very railroady. Even to the point where
Mhm.
like episode number 2 is you move it into right, which it doesn't matter what direction the characters go on the island when they're stranded. It's like you're to move the encounter so it's right in front of them that
Yeah.
they're going to run into it. I did not like that part of it. However, I
Mhm.
will admit though, once you got into the individual episodes, there was lots of choices, and
Mhm.
I did appreciate that there was several different ways that you could kind of work your way through or solve each individual episode. So
Mhm.
so the overall
Yes.
arcing plot was very railroady, but the inside the episodes was not railroady, so that was good. I don't know how you felt about that.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there are notes in the adventure certainly to adapt things a little bit for your stealthy party versus your more brash party, which I like.
Mhm.
Those were actually the parts of the adventure that I tend to find myself liking more and more on rereading now. When they give you different ways that the characters can go about it and the consequences. Those were some of my points I find better. So what about the art and the maps? What's your impression there, Chris?
Not first of all of cover art, easily awesome.
Hmm.
Really like that.
Yeah.
There wasn't back cover art, which was a little bit of a bummer, but that was back, and once
Yeah.
they moved to this new format, there wasn't back cover art on that,
Right.
on these adventures. So but Jeff Easley cover art, amazing. And again, one of those things, probably when you
Hmm.
mention this adventure to me, it's probably the first thing I conjure up is that awesome cover art.
Hmm.
So that's the first thing. Only 6 pieces of art in the book. 2 of them were full pages.
Yes.
An interesting style. They were
Yeah,
okay. They
to be
weren't
sure.
larger than normal, but for a 36-page adventure, there were 8
Hmm.
PC portraits, which were
Yep.
they were okay. They were very similar, very samey. I thought the PCs, they weren't
Yes.
very
Yep.
distinctive, apart looking
Yeah.
from each other. So maybe those 8 pieces kind of took away some of the interior art that we could have had. So
Hmm.
I was a little bit disappointed in the art outside of the cover art. What about you for the art? And then we'll get to the maps after that.
That, yeah, that's, I mean, in one sense, I found some of the art pieces because, you've got, like you said, you can't go wrong with easily on the cover. And then, you've got one artist doing the interior. So you've got a limited amount of art and it's only coming from one artist as opposed to several, which was more the norm around this time. There were some pieces like the goddess piece, for instance, if we could put that up, just flash that up, Elena, or the stranded piece that I found very evocative. And I think they're great. They're nice, moody, woodcutty looking pieces of art that, really use the black and white style nicely. And then there's other pieces that totally turned me off, like the goblin versus orc piece. It's just, I think I had very firmly in my head what goblins and orcs look like per the monster manual. And when I saw that piece, I'm just like, those aren't goblins, And obviously it's that artist's take on goblins, but it kind of did nothing for me. So there were some pieces that I felt were very evocative. I love the goddess piece. I think that's fits the mood of that scene. But yeah, it's I think it could have done with more art.
Yeah.
The maps left me really flat. Mainly on I guess my main bugaboo is with the manor map that is looking so samey. And,
Yes.
and I've been, as you well know, I've been guilty of this myself. Sometimes when you design things, you get in a certain, mind length that you aren't thinking about maybe how interesting things look or how unique or whatever. But the more I DM and the older I get, I love when I'm able to look at a map and visually differentiate different areas or recognize them as a DM and be like, oh, that's the area where the giant lizards are, and that's the area where this is, and that's the cave where this is. And if you look at this manor map, you don't know what room.
Oh yeah. It's terrible.
You could name any character, I mean, any encounter and ask me the number of the room. I couldn't tell you,
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of thing.
They're
All
all
those rooms.
squares.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all squares and rectangles, and
And
yeah.
yeah, and I mean, again, it was the product maybe of its time because this was a little later on, and
Yeah.
there was a point I remember in second edition. I don't remember if it was beginning of second edition or later on, where the cave maps looked very samey. They all just looked like round balloons, and they were very, not those jagged caves that we were used to from, Halls of the Fire Giant King or whatever. So maybe it was the start of that sort of style, for TSR. But yeah, it just left me flat. I could have done with maps that are a little more evocative for the DM.
Yeah, I completely agree. The temple map and the manor map were really take you out of the mood. I liked the player handout maps on the leaves, the
Mhm.
ones that the NPC kind of hastily scribes up. I thought that was actually kind of cool, and I thought
Yep.
that was kind of neat to be able to have those to hand out. to the players. I thought that was
Yeah.
really deep. But yeah, you get to those maps and they're just boring. And here's another thing too. And again, I get it. This is the downside of zero level characters. That manor house has like 40 encounters in it and not many critters. There's 40 keyed
Yeah.
locations and
Yeah.
very few actual encounters. And not a lot of interesting ones, not a lot of variety. I mean, it's
Hmm.
basically orcs and goblins. You get down to the catacombs, it's like giant rats, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I get it. The temple has one encounter essentially, one ghoul. I understand that everybody's got like 6 hit points
Yeah.
and they're wielding clubs and probably no armor, so it's tricky. But
Hmm.
I felt like there probably should have been some more centipedes and some spiders and just some stuff like that, just some different things.
Yeah.
I also thought that the island itself lacked an ecology, quite frankly. I mean,
Yeah.
they really didn't go into encounters. And again, random encounters will wear a party down.
Yeah.
I understand that if you had a random encounter or two, that could be a TPK or lead to a TPK
Hmm.
once you got to the meat of the adventure. So I guess I sort of understand we're getting it, but you could have done an encounter table without combat. You could have done
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
things flying overhead,
Hmm.
or you find a mysterious statue or something. There
Yeah.
could have been something that they could have done a little bit more.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the room descriptions were boring. There was just a lot of non-action kind of going on. And
Hmm.
again, it definitely comes back to concept was awesome, and then execution was just probably not very. But
Yeah.
hey, they could have had a ton of encounters in the manor house, and playtesting might have shown, oh no, you're gonna just chew through these characters, like you
Yeah.
can't do that. So I guess I understand on the other hand.
Yeah, it's a hard balance. I think some other modules like our beloved U1, I think the Haunted Manor House and that struck a better
Yeah.
balance between having
Yep.
some critters and having some empty areas, because that house never felt boring to me.
Exactly.
Where the manor house and even the temple, and it's a shame because I look at the temple map and I think like, oh, here's a plug and play temple that I can uproot from this module and maybe and then when I read the descriptions, I'm like, wow, it's just like a lot of administrative rooms and kind of stuff, and it just, yeah, it's not singing for me. So for that reason, again, it's implementation. It's just, if there was ever a classic module that screamed for a redo, that it would be this one, that just somebody to breathe some real life into this. And like you said, even as far as the island, I like stranded on the island type adventures and even setups, where the characters are kind of, thrown up on the island. And I know it's very cliche, but I love those kind of starts. But I think they only work if the island kind of gets its own character. If the island is,
Yeah.
given a pirate mythos or it's haunted, or it's, given some kind of feel to it. And here they almost bend over backward to go out of their way to say, hey, this island is totally uninhabited. There's no, flora, fauna. I mean, I think they even tell you like initially that basically there's nothing on this island kind of thing. It really seemed like their single-minded goal was to get the characters into the buildings on the
Yeah.
island. And again, I kind of understand why, but it's a shame. It's like a missed opportunity, I think, for some atmosphere, if nothing else, because like you said, you can always have sounds that the players hear, or flyovers, or things of that nature. So it's kind of a shame. I think a missed opportunity there, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I'm going to agree. In the chat we have, it's incumbent upon the DM to tailor the adventure to suit their players. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any DM worth their salt is definitely going to tweak the source material, especially if they're using published material, to
Yeah.
base it to kind of make it more appealing for their specific group. When we've talked about this, the importance of a session
Yeah.
zero, or at least knowing your target audience. But still, the
Yeah.
concept is good. It's solid. I will be honest with you. I'm very tempted to run this type of adventure, do like a conversion on the fly kind of thing. It'd be pretty easy, in my opinion, to kind of convert
Hmm.
in a fly, probably for first level characters. But I've got some new potential groups coming up with a local 4-H group that I have, and I'm almost thinking, I'm like, this
Hmm.
wouldn't be terrible to actually take
Yeah.
this concept and tweak it a little bit and see how it goes and everything. All right, so I feel like we're piling on this adventure a little bit. Tell me something you liked about it. What did you what was what struck out of you as like they did this very cool, or this was done well?
Sure. Well, I'm gonna, mention this later, but as well, but I like the goddess element to
Yeah.
it. Now, for some people, that might seem a little too maybe heavy-handed or Deus Machina or whatever, but for me, I like that. I like the way it's handled. I like all the notes about how the characters can gain favor with the goddess. Again, for people who don't understand the module, there's a very firm sort of deadline put down on the characters in this module, that you have these humanoids rampaging all over this island, defacing the temple of this kind of ill-defined goddess that the DM can really kind of put their stamp on who the goddess is. But the goddess is not thrilled, and the goddess has decided that she is going to wipe this island clean, basically, after like an evening. And then when the goddess finds the adventures, she's sort of intrigued, and she decides to stay her hand for a day. And basically the characters basically have 24 hours to get out of Dodge before the goddess wipes the place out. And the goddess basically shows up and kind of tells the characters this, and has a little, verbal intercourse with the characters. And there's even a chance the characters could potentially ask the goddess some questions. And that little episode, or whatever you want to call it, I think was well handled. I like that part of the temple. I think it adds a nice time limit. I like the way it's handled. It absolutely lights a fire under the characters, to get going. So that's an element I really liked of this adventure.
Yeah, I would agree. That's probably one of my favorite elements of it. I actually love putting a timer basically on the adventure. I think it definitely takes it to the next level. It definitely raises the stakes. And they do that really twice in the adventure. The first time they do that is the exposure to the cold. It kind of encourages you to move along, and like you said, to get to those buildings. So I actually do, I particularly enjoy that part of it. I think that probably, if that element wasn't there, there wouldn't be a whole lot to this adventure. I think there would not be that sense of urgency to get off of the island. There would not be the sense of urgency to explore some of these places outside of, I just need some shelter and everything. So yeah, I agree. I think that's by far that was one of my more favorite parts of it as well. What did you think of the NPCs, the two NPCs that were the prominent NPCs in the module?
I mean, I kind of laughed on rereading it. I guess when I read Keystake, I'm going to pronounce it that way, because I thought to myself, oh, here we go, another crazy old man. Because I now that we're really going through all these modules, it's amazing how many kind of old men are encountered that are either A, prisoners, B, sources of information, C, prisoners and sources of information, or they're just basically crazy old hermits, kind of thing. Yep. If we ever ran into just an old man who was just an old man and had all his wits and, was helpful, it'd probably be a surprise. So I kind of got a kick out of that. But yeah, I mean, I think they're fine. I mean, what was your take on that?
Yeah, I have to admit, definitely tropey. I thought it was interesting that Keystake was so prominent and helpful, and then basically turns on the PCs at the very last episode. I thought it was kind of cool. I kind of figured at that point you probably weren't expecting it. I actually really liked the inclusion of the other NPC, Melisana. Which was perfect too. It's like if nobody picks a sailor background, she has it. She's another one of the ones that's trapped in the hull of the ship when it crashes. So and I like it that she was that voice of reason that the game master could use to keep the PCs on the right track. And kind of could be that maybe we don't want to go this way, maybe we want to go this way, maybe we want to do this, maybe we want to do that, but not necessarily lead them around, but having that option to kind of save the PCs, if you will, or at least push them in the right direction. So I thought it was interesting. And again, giving two full-fledged NPCs with very different backgrounds and motives.
Yeah.
Heaping that
Yeah.
on the novice game master was also kind of tricky too. I mean, other novice level adventures have done that. Again, I think
Yeah.
probably looking back at this, my biggest issue with the adventure is probably is it's not really for a novice game master. I mean,
Yeah.
it's great that they put all the
It's
extra
so funny
stuff
that
in
you
there, but so
yeah, it's so funny that you just say that, because as you were talking about the NPC, I just got that thought in my head. I was thinking, what a dichotomy between these two
yeah,
NPCs, one of which is the voice of reason, leading the characters in the right direction, and the other one purposely misleading them, and both controlled by the DM. And
yeah,
like you said, what a job for a novice DM to handle, right? So
yeah, definitely. So okay, so do we have any other overall feelings on it, or do we want to get to our top five?
yeah, I think we could jump in.
Okay. All right. Nope. That sounds very good. Do you have any honorable mentions?
Um, yeah, I'm gonna throw out an easy honorable mention. Area 24, the hallway. That is just a very simple situation, but that's just something where the characters sort of stumble right in the middle of a
Yeah,
three-way. If you remember that. The
I
orcs
do.
are kind of emerging in one area, the goblins are emerging from the other direction, and the characters are, oh boy. And obviously, again, depending on your players, a lot of different ways this could spill out, and they tell you in the encounter that nobody's surprised. It's sort of just everybody's encountered everybody, and the characters have different options the way they can handle it. They can just kind of dive under cover and let things go where they may, and then emerge later after the dust settles. So I found that interesting. So that's my honorable mention.
Cool. All right. My honorable mention is I actually have two kind of. First is the
Okay.
fact that the Sea King who used to live on this island had a ring of wishes. And when
Hmm.
he dies from the pirate attack, Keystake, who has been around since all those 60 years, actually makes a prayer and actually accidentally uses the wish up from the ring, and actually keeps him alive, sort of,
Hmm.
kind of, So I thought that was actually interesting, an interesting way to kind of tie everything into what all happened 60 years ago. I thought that was kind of they didn't have to
Hmm.
put that plot element in there, but I thought it was kind of neat. In my opinion, also probably explains part of Keystake's insanity.
Hmm.
I think the other thing that I kind of liked as an honorable mention is the fact that in the Manor House, there were specifically several magic items that were very helpful, and they were scattered
Hmm.
about. And that was a big part of that phase of the adventure was exploring around and finding them. There was a javelin, there was a dagger, there was a
Hmm.
scroll, a wand. So I thought that part was actually kind of neat. I've been a pretty big fan of that,
Hmm.
especially when the characters are in over their head, giving them that little bit of
Hmm.
magical assistance, especially if it's like a potion or a scroll, something that's expendable, usable.
Yeah.
Give them that extra choice of, do I use the potion now? Do I not?
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that, so I actually kind of like
Hmm.
that inclusion in it. So,
Yeah. And
um,
I think it was handled well too. I think most of those
yes,
instances, that's what, like, if we're going to talk about positive, more
yeah,
positive for the module, that is an example. I think, like, the way the javelin was hidden on the front of this
yes,
sort of plaque, and another encounter where the characters, basically the wand they're looking for is being scrutinized by the
by
goblins as
yes,
they enter
yeah,
the room. um so some nice handling there with the magic items. So, and I
yeah.
wholeheartedly agree, the idea of this sort of almost scavenger hunt for these items is a great kind of mechanic. I like that.
Cool. All right, so let's get very positive here with our
All
top
right.
five facets. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Why don't you start?
Okay. So my number five is Appendix 2, the Corin Archipelago. Me.
Hmm.
So this is the setting, the overall setting. So we get a nice color map of all the islands, and we get a little bit of history. I like it that there's not too many details here, because a big part of this is so that you could drop it into your own campaign. So obviously it's a
Hmm.
thumbnail sketch, if you will, but they give a little bit of general features of the islands. They give a little bit of, guide to the islands, a little bit of how to kind of incorporate this into your campaign setting, and then even how to use it for further adventures once the
Hmm.
PCs escape. This can kind of be your setting. You start off with your campaign kind of small, and then you kind of branch your way out. So they gave you a couple paragraphs of some different things that you could do there. I like that. I thought it was a nice add-on. They certainly didn't need to do that. I thought it was enough detail. Again, I question, in thinking back to it, is like, boy, if we had this page and a half or whatever it was, 2 pages of details on the island that the adventures actually set on, maybe that would have been a little bit better. But I
Yeah.
am kind of glad that we got this information, for clearly the authors were thinking ahead of, once you get off the island, since the
Hmm.
island's going to go away very soon. Maybe that's why they didn't want to detail the island up too much. The
Mm,
island's going to get destroyed. So,
true.
don't give them a reason to stay there, give them a
Yeah.
reason to go on and explore the other islands and everything. Always fascinating. And I was kind of fascinated by the fact that, all those different islands, the islands are a great opportunity for a campaign, because the islands can be so different.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, you
Yeah.
get to one island and there's dinosaurs on it, you get to another island and it's
Mhm.
just a desert or a barren rock, and you get to another island and
Yeah.
it's a lush forest. And so
Yeah.
I think you have a lot of fun with changing up your environments there and everything. So I've always been kind of fascinated with
Hmm.
that concept. I always felt that would have made a very great, a really neat entry level, or kind of a tight knit campaign setting. So my number 5 is Appendix
Mm,
2, the details of the setting.
nice. I agree. I think an archipelago could really be a nice little microcosm as a,
Yeah.
sort of campaign for the reasons you said, just the fact that the characters could travel back and forth between the different islands and experience very different conditions on different islands or different inhabitants. It's really like having them visit different areas in a wider world. So yeah, definitely. All right, so number 5, and I think this one might be controversial. So this is my own personal preference. Was the monster hit point boxes. If we could put up the monster summary graphic, Alana. Um, I like these. Again, leaning toward the beginning DM. I remember when I was starting to DM, for whatever reason, I remember using boxes like this, where you could, if you had a lot of different creatures, you could just kind of check off the hit points as they took damage. Nowadays, I just put down, I just have a pad and I just have, like the hit point number, and I don't know, just put the lower number underneath it. But for whatever reason at the time, I found checking these boxes off, good. And I like the fact that it was presented. This is one element that, was presented in this module that I think is good for maybe beginning DMs. The fact that they've kind of grouped those hit points into groups of 3 for each giant rat or whatever they've done. And you could just, check off the hit points as they take damage. I like that element. So as just a sort of DM aid, that's my number 5, the monster hit
Cool.
point boxes.
Awesome. All right. My number 4, you already touched on this. This is basically the whole warning of the goddess, the whole
Mhm.
goddess kind of storyline here. Again, the temple was kind of a neat. I remember when I was first reading this adventure way back in the day, I was like, temple, this is going to be awesome. And then,
Mhm.
not really, but the whole fact that they spend so much time, they spend less time on the actual temple setting, more time on the vision, what the goddess says, how she says it. And then, they present it as a long read aloud text, but then they say, this shouldn't be a read aloud text. This should
Mhm.
really be a back and forth between the characters and the goddess. If any of the characters have had a tendency to follow in the footsteps of the faith, well, then here's a perfect opportunity. This would be a good opportunity for a PC to jump on this particular faith. You mentioned there was the whole favor disfavor rules, which was kind of neat. And like I said, I really liked the time frame, the sense of urgency. I think is what really set this
Mhm.
adventure aside. Love that part. Love the fact that she says, she promises that if you do escape in time, that your ship will not be harmed in the cataclysm, which I thought was interesting too. It's like, yay, we get off the island and then a tidal wave takes us out or something. So I really like that. And then I like the fact that you wake up the following morning, all of your wounds are healed. So
Yes,
I kind of thought that was kind of neat. It
much
just fit.
needed.
Yes, and much needed. I really liked something like that. That would have been
Mhm.
a great way to maybe to find a way in some of the other episodes at the end to find some other healing or something. I think because there was no
Yeah.
other healing, I think, available. So that was great. I thought that was some really astute design right there, which
Yeah.
worked out very well. So that's my number 4, the whole angle of the goddess and her whole
Mhm.
side of things.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And yeah, I think the healing was really definitely handled. This was an example where, it's an easy way to give back characters hit points they might have lost even just from exposure or something initially.
Yep.
That, the war of attrition later, I'm sure that those lost hit points would catch up to them in a very bad way. So great design choice, and it totally makes sense within the story, for what's happening. All right, moving on to my number 4, and boy, I'm kind of conglomerating a lot of little areas with this one, but this is, I'm going to call this the crypt/royal greetings, and this touches on something you mentioned with your honorable mention. First off, I really like the individual crypts with the writings on the lids and the, you give me, we've talked about this before with the Strahd adventure and a bunch of things. I think when you give me a bunch of different tombs to open or crypts or sarcophagi to open with different, it to me, it just falls into that, room with many statues or room with many boxes type of concept where I'm a sucker for that every time. And here you get a little bit of that in there. And then just, the whole, it's just eerie almost the way you find the two that look very lifelike, the lying in there, lying in state, looking like they just died yesterday, with their eyes open. And then, the way that kind of feeds into the story and even maybe speaks to why Keystake kind of is the way he is, and what happened with the Ring of Wishes. I love that. And at least that makes a nice kind of ending, the characters having to confront those two. It's probably something they would not expect. So maybe I should have ranked this higher, but yeah, that whole kind of, once you get past the catacombs into the crypt and do the crypt and the royal greeting, I think it's a nice tie up toward the end of the adventure. So that's a nice solid number 4 for me.
Excellent. Cool. All right. I love it. I like it. Number 3 for me is, I guess technically this is a crossover. This is the monster roster in the back of the DM's
Okay.
aid that you'd mentioned. I thought this was great. It was organized by episode. It was basically one whole page, but all the stats were kind of summarized on one page. Right there, you can, you just basically have that one whole page. You don't need to do any other flipping back and forth or everything. The checks boxes, yes, I did like that. I thought it was a good concept. Hackmaster did that, but this is where it doesn't work though. When something's got like 88 hit points, it's like it takes up so much room. It works really great.
That could be a problem.
Yeah, it works great when you've got 10 giant rats with 3 hit points each.
Right.
But when you have like 6 hill giants and they each have 55 hit points, then it gets to be like half a page.
That's funny.
And I remember Hackmaster used to do it though. They used to do that. Yeah. It didn't matter how many hit points they all had. They had the checkboxes.
Yeah, so. I'm glad you said that because I knew I had seen that done somewhere else.
Yep.
Beyond this module, and I couldn't get my head around where I had seen it because I remember I had, copied it at various times, over the years DMing, even later on there was a point where I started doing that, and I did have 1 or 2 of the Hackmaster things, so maybe I got it from there in my head.
But the only thing is, XP was so important in this module and they didn't include XP with these statistics anywhere. So I thought that was actually a shortfall, although at the end of each episode they did do a nice little summary of everything that could give you XP, including like the equipment and the magic items and stuff like that. So maybe that's why they didn't do it. But anyway, my number 3 was the monster roster DM aid. Big fan of whenever you can make the DM's life any easier. So my number 3.
Nice. All right, moving on to my number 3. This is again more of a general facet or element, is the kind of major stealth element that runs through this. There aren't that many adventures where there's kind of an emphasis on, stealth being a helpful element. And this one, it's certainly, characters are ill-equipped. They don't have a lot of hit points. Again, the players can go about it several different ways, but I would think most groups would probably want to lean towards stealth in the areas of this, certainly while going through the manor looking for their little goodies. And I really like that area. And I think in some areas it's handled very well. Like there's an area where the characters are finding the secret passage to go down into the catacombs, I believe it is. And they're given kind of, the notes are laid out in the adventure that you can just wrench the secret door open really fast, or they can kind of
Yeah.
slowly pry it. And there's a chance every, so many seconds or whatever that the goblin down the hall might hear this creaking, So the characters have a big choice. What are they going to do? Are we going to thrust this thing open and half the island can hear it, or what are we, and dive down the thing? Or are we going to creak it? I like that. I like the fact that notes are presented to handle that, and that, really, again, speaking toward new DMs, at least there is something there that you've got all these different situations kind of covered. And just the fact that the adventure really speaks toward elements of stealth, stealth being something required. I'd love to see more adventures where the characters were maybe overwhelmed in certain situations and how to use stealth to navigate around or spy or whatever. So I like that element of it. So that's my number 3.
That's a great creative one. I didn't even think about that. I mean, I was thinking about that whole encounter with the secret door, with the rules for, if you do it this way, yes, you'll get through it real quickly, but you're going to alert everybody. If you do it the other way, it's going to take time, but you might not. So all right, so that was a solid number 3. So my number 2 is it's an encounter, sort of, but it's a pretty long one. It's episode 1, basically the start of the adventure. Sea and Storm. So this is basically how you start things off, and I love the fact that you start right up into the action. Your ship is basically in the storm, tossed around, and then it crashes, and then it's up to you to try and figure out how to escape. There's one slaver that's left, half Chris. And I like it. He's kind of basically tromping up and down the beach because he's upset, because he is, look what situation he's in now. The ship has crashed, everybody's dead. I love the fact that he's drunk, and that actually makes him easier to overcome. Yet if you don't overcome him right away, like, he gets less and less, he sobers up. So there was like rules for that. Love that. Love it. Love that there was several options. You could try to attack him, you could try to capture him, you could just try to flee from him, and each of those had some ramifications to them. And he, he had some equipment, so maybe you wanted to take him out. If you just fled, well, all right, you wouldn't get into a fight, but then you don't have his cloak and boots, and you don't have his sword and that. So I like that. I like the NPC, being able to use Melisana there to kind of help out the PCs a little bit. And again, the exposure rules, where if you didn't start moving away from the beach and the wreckage, you would start taking damage. And with 6 hit points, it would take you pretty quickly to find out, wow, we need to move. And if we don't move, we're going to die. I love that. I love that sense of urgency. Yes, it's a little brutal, but I really enjoyed that. And again, and all the episodes at the end, a nice little XP summary at the end, kind of, because let's face it, you're scraping for every little XP that you can get and piece of equipment. It was really nice that they had those summaries at the end. Here's everything. If you defeat half Chris, this is what you get. If you get this, you get this. So I really enjoyed that. So that's my number 2, episode 1, kind of its entirety, kind of like the whole start of the adventure.
Well, I think we have our first absolute crossover.
All right.
I loved the whole episode 1 setup. You laid out everything, but I love the fact that the slaver is drunk. I love the fact, like you said, that they basically say the more he paces up and down the island, the more sober he's going to get, and thereby get better at combat. So the characters take, and that, which is a timer in itself, because if the characters take too long debating what they're going to do, he actually gets more dangerous. And just the whole chaos of the scene. And again, I respect that some DMs might find this awfully railroady, in the same way that maybe some DMs wouldn't like the beginning of the last, the end of the original Slaver series, A4 could be, but I also love that one. So, maybe it's just me. But yeah, I love the whole setup. I use that sort of exposure thing. Even now, I literally played D&D last night with my players, and I hit them with a version of exposure where they were on high up on a mountaintop in a lashing rainstorm on a crumbling ledge. And I basically made it clear, you have to get out of here, So I've employed that sort of technique to kind of push the characters to another location. So yeah, total crossover.
Right.
I love it. I love the opening. I wish the rest of this module continued as strongly as the opening, you know.
Yeah, definitely. So all right. I have a feeling our next part's going to be a crossover too. I just have this sneaky
All right.
feeling.
Huh.
So my number one is Appendix 1, If Things Go Wrong.
There we
um,
go.
so this is the whole at the end of the module. You know, I'm not sure I would have put this at the end of the module. I think I would have put this in with the individual episodes because I think that's where it would have, you know, again, to prevent the flipping of the pages back and forth.
Hmm.
But I guess maybe it was, I don't know, maybe it was designed that you could pull it out or photocopy it or something and use it. But I love this part. I love, again, this is the part where yes, we're going to try and help out the novice game master, even though we've already gone through all the reasons why this is probably not a great adventure for the novice. This part was good. This part was great.
Yeah.
What happens if for PC death and replacing
Hmm.
PCs? Well, we got specific episode by episode of here's how you can plug in new PCs. Loved it. What if they don't escape their bonds early on? You know, because that was a real thing. Like
Hmm.
they were like nobody got free in the crash. Like you had to still escape your bonds, which could be
Yeah.
a problem actually if you don't. So if you just get terrible die rolls or something, that could definitely be a problem.
Hmm.
You know, what about half Chris? If you leave half Chris alive, like what happens with that? What happens if the PCs don't go to the temple? Now, a lot of this stuff was because it was so
Hmm.
railroady and you kind of had to do it.
Yeah.
There were these notes where what happens if they don't go to the temple? Well, the goddess will visit them while they're camping outside. Okay, well that's great. That actually works in my opinion. I think that's fine.
Hmm.
You know, apparently there's the goblin and or the orc ships. They could have tried to storm the goblin and orc ships and take control of the ships and sailed away on those, but apparently there were so many of the humanoids that was like certain death. I think they even
Hmm.
said. You know, what if the PCs just try to build a raft and sail away? And they kind of told you about that, like, yep, it's not gonna work. So I liked the fact that they gave you that advice and kind
Hmm.
of put it all. I would have liked it maybe in all the individual episodes, but I still appreciated that it was there, and that's probably what truly makes this for novice game masters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's my
Well,
number one, Appendix 1.
I did not cross over for my number
Wow.
one choice. Yeah.
Wow.
However, I love that section. Love it. I found myself on this review going back to that again and again.
Yeah.
And it really sort of reminded me of some of the UK modules we've reviewed
Yep.
recently,
Yep.
where they, in times, you know, like with U2, where they present difficult circumstances, but then at least they give you the, you know, the notes
Yep.
to handle it. And that's kind of like my advice, you know, on the side to DMs. If you're going to throw a difficult situation in an adventure at another DM, then give them the notes to handle it, which they certainly do in that appendix. So yeah,
Yeah.
that appendix is a shining spot in this module, to be sure. Yeah, my number one, which again is just harkening back, so I'll be quick. It was harkening back to something I mentioned earlier. It's just what I'm calling the goddess countdown, is basically the whole goddess thing, the whole time element. Anybody who's looked at any of my published adventures knows I'm a huge fan of putting a timer on the PC's heads, maybe too much, because it's just such a great way to build urgency and gravitas and basically, you know, give the characters a real sense of, you know, purpose, and the players a sense of, you know, instead of just painfully examining every room, now they really need to kind of move a little bit. And I love that. And I think it's in a way the soul of this adventure for me. I think if you took the goddess out, this adventure would be very soulless. I really feel like the, you know, the two spots that give this adventure life for me are the two NPCs and are the intervention of the goddess. So I think they really kind of breathe life into a more you know, into the more lifeless areas of the camp adventure. So yeah, that's my number one. It's just that whole time urgency and element connected to the goddess, and the fact that, you know, literally the island will be destroyed. So there's, you know, talk about you know, a major, you know, a major event you want to avoid. So yeah, that's my number one.
All right. Excellent. So cool. All right. So that is our top 5 of N4 Treasure Hunt.
Okay.
Rick, you got some announcements for us?
Sure. Well, as always, folks, we're delighted you could join us tonight. If you liked what you saw, please give us a like, give us a follow. If you're watching us later on YouTube, if you haven't already, subscribe because it helps us, and keep those comments coming. And I also want to thank my cat who bit a nice big hole. My copy of this module has lasted for what, 30 years. I laid it on the carpet for one day and the cat took a big bite out of the front of it. So I thank my cat for that. And what are we looking at? Next show. We have 3 shows left in our season before Chris and I take our annual holiday break and, kind of catch our breath and, take a well-earned break. So we're going to do some kind of special shows, and our next show is coming to you on October 2nd at 8 p.m. And this is going to be a really fun one. Chris and I are going to present our top 10 adventure series, and we're going to go through them from 10 right through 1. And, folks, we love if you join in with us. So, that's your homework for tonight. If you want, go find a piece of paper, write down your top 10, bring it in 3 weeks, and join us on October 2nd and, see how your list stacks up against ours.
And I think the interesting thing apart about that is, well, what makes an adventure series? I think that part alone is kind of interesting. Like, is this an adventure series? Is G123 a series, D123 a series, but then what happens to Q1, or is it all 7? You know what?
Yeah.
I think we're just going to deal with it as we deal with it. So I think whatever we say is a series is going to be a series. So.
I was going to ask you off camera about that, because then you've even got like, just having the same letter, does that constitute a series, or does there have to be a narrative?
Have to definitely be connected.
We want a narrative, right?
Yeah, there needs to be some connective tissue there. Some connective
all right,
tissue.
we need some connective, right?
There's still a little bit of wiggle room in there. So, but I'd say we leave it up to ourselves. Surprise us, because it's going to be kind of hard to find 10 series. So I think it'll be interesting just to see like how we interpret it. So that's how we're going to do that.
Well, yeah, like I'll come out right now before and this is all I'll say is I would not present myself G123, D123, and Q1 as just one. I will probably slice that in half or something. I have a feeling I might very well split that into the G series and the D series. I'll warn you. So, but I agree that we need that narrative connection. I think is a must. So
that's going to be an awesome show. But then it even gets better. It even gets better.
Oh yeah. Do we want to tell them now, or we want to?
Yes, let's tell them now. Let's.
All right, sure. What else do we have on October 23rd? Right, just before Halloween. We're going to come at you with our top 10 classic adventures. And it's kind of amazing in 2 years of doing this show. Because Goodman Games did do a show before talking TSR. And I wasn't on that particular show, but Chris was, where you and several other designers from Goodman Games did share their classics. But Chris and I have never done it bouncing off of each other on this show. And I've definitely wanted to do it. So we're going to present, after all this talking about all these modules, and maybe even some we haven't talked about yet might be on that list, I suspect. We're going to present our top 10. So there's another show where you folks can absolutely join us, I think, and write your own list up.
And I'm not even going to look at my 2.5 years ago list of top 10. I'm just going because I feel that in the last 2.5 years I've kind of brushed up on all of these. So I think I might have changed my opinion on some.
Good. Coming fresh.
So that's going to be an awesome show.
And then our last kind of special show before we take our holiday break will be on November 13th. We'll remind you then, of course. And that's going to be we did this once before, like a sort of holiday gift guide. It might be other stuff thrown in that show too, but we're going to go over some gifts for the, your favorite geek and D&D related, things. And there's some cool products out there that people aren't always aware of. And I think, we can find some and share them with you folks, because we did that before and it was kind of fun. So
yeah, definitely. So
I'm looking forward to these 3 shows. I think they're going to be a lot of fun.
Yes. I'm looking forward to it too. That's why I wanted to tease them now, so people could kind of think about it before we get to it. So with that, yes, I will say thank you. My pearl wisdom for the day, for this episode is, I'm probably going to steal yours, but I'm going to do it. A sense of urgency.
Nice.
Get that clicking, get that ticking clock going. because that just raises the stakes. It makes things, you might have a boring situation, or maybe it's not a very interesting circumstance, but then you put in that time constraint, and it just takes it to the next level. So do not be afraid to use that as a game master.
Yeah.
Probably don't want to overuse it. You probably want to use it in moderation, but certainly
Yeah.
for some special events, roll it out to your players. I think they'll thank you for it.
I can't agree more. I'm a huge fan, as you know, of that. And like Chris said, you can overdo it. You can, get your poor players where they feel like they're always being rushed around, and you don't want to do that. But done right, it's a wonderful technique. My pearl of wisdom is a little different, and it's kind of hearkening to the whole concept of this adventure, which is what I think the value in starting from the ground up. I do love adventures, especially high-level adventures where pre-gens are provided, and we're very good at Goodman Games with our adventures, I think, of providing, pre-gens, because they can be super valuable for these plug-and-play times where you really need a character. But I think there's a great value for both DM and player in building characters from the ground up, and this module really builds from the ground up. But even just building characters from first level up, I think it's good for the DM. It's good for the players. They get much more comfortable with their character. They learn the abilities as they stack up and grow, and just for the sense of familiarity that grows, around that character from everyone concerned. I think it can be really important. So the fact that this adventure does that, in a big way, I love. So that's my pearl of wisdom is, even though it's tempting sometimes to jump in at 5th level or 4th level, don't forget, sometimes it's good, to start from first level, even if, maybe the goblins have gotten a little boring. Start the characters at first level and grow them up, because it can be a great experience when you do get them up to 10th level, thinking of the journey they've taken.
Yes, I agree 1000%. That is excellent, excellent advice. Well, with that, we are going to bid everybody a fond farewell, and we will be back with you, we promise, in 3 weeks. So we will see you all on October 2nd. And with that, everybody enjoy pumpkin spice season and the turning of the leaves and some cooler temperatures and everything. And we'll see you then. We'll be back with our top 10 adventure series from the classic era. So take care, everybody.